love being able to use my Cricut to take inexpensive items and make them look more high-end. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Jess. Today I have 3 more Christmas crafts for you, and I want to give a big thank you to Cricut for sponsoring today's video. I'm going to be using the Cricut Maker 3 today. And the Cricut Maker 3 is a smart cutting machine that cuts hundreds of materials, everything from vinyl to leather to cardstock to fabric. And what I love about the Cricut is that it comes with a free software program called Design Space that has thousands of fonts, images, projects, so many things that you can think of to give you ideas for your DIYs. So today I'm going to keep it pretty simple though. The 2 materials that I'm going to use for my projects are the Smart Permanent Vinyl and also the Smart Iron-On. Alright everyone, let's get started. For the first project, I knew I needed 2 frames, so I'm using 2 canvases. One is 6x8 that I got from the Dollar Tree, and the other one's 12x12. Now if you don't have a 12x12 canvas, you can use one of these photo frames from the Dollar Tree. I just like the wood that's inside these 12x12 canvases, so that's why I chose to use that. And I did get that canvas at Michael's. I prepped each of the canvases just by using my utility knife to remove the canvas from the frame. For the 12x12 canvas, I was careful when I was removing the material because I wanted to keep that because I knew I was going to use that later on in a project. And after I had all the material off both of the frames, I did take all of the staples out of the back side of the frames as well. Before painting the wood frames, I decided to sand them down just a little bit, especially this one from the Dollar Tree because it had a lot of rough edges on it. And both of them had a little bit of a number printed on the inside, and I wanted to make sure that that was covered up before I moved on to painting. So once I had both of them smoothed out pretty well, I decided to use the Plaster Color by Waverly, which you know is one of my favorite colors. And I gave each of the frames and a few of these giant craft sticks a light coat of the Plaster Color. I wouldn't say that I dry brushed it, but it was definitely not a full coverage coat because I wanted it to look just a little bit distressed. After my paint was dry, I decided I wanted them to be distressed just a little bit more, but I didn't want to use another paint color, so I decided just to sand the edges a little bit, especially because since these frames are wood, by sanding down some of that paint, it kind of showed that wood through a little bit more. To attach the frames together, I flipped both of them over on the back side, and I used my ruler to mark the center point on each side of both frames. So for the 12x12, I just marked it 6 inches on all 4 sides, and then for the 6x8, I had to mark at 4 inches on the long side and 3 inches on the short side. And then that way, when I lined the smaller frame inside of the bigger frame, I could just make sure that my dots were lined up, and that way it would be centered within the bigger frame. Once I had the smaller frame lined up inside the bigger frame, then I took those giant craft sticks and I just marked where I needed to cut them for each side, and that's what was going to attach the 2 frames together. Now I have some little tumbling tower pieces underneath that small frame because it's not quite as thick as the bigger frame, and I wanted the back sides of the frames to be even with each other. And that worked out for this part, but then I realized once I started gluing that the tumbling tower blocks were just a little bit too big, so I switched out and I just piled some craft sticks up underneath the frame instead. And then I just used a little bit of hot glue to attach the craft sticks to both of the frames. Next, I went into Cricut Design Space to create the image for the center frame. So I started by clicking on New Project, and that took me to the Design Space canvas. And from there, I just clicked on Image. And under Image, I just searched for Christmas because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to go inside of the small frame, but I knew that Cricut Design Space would help me figure that out. So once I scrolled through and I found the image I liked, all I had to do was insert it onto the canvas. I was really excited about this word collage that I found in the Cricut Design Space because I like all the different fonts and the couple little graphics that are inside of it, and I was trying to think of what this word grid is called. So if you know what these are called, let me know in the comments because I know there's a name for them, but I'm just not sure what they're called. I just kept calling it a word collage, and I don't think that's right. So once I had the image in the design space, then I just had to click on the bottom right corner where the 2 arrows are, and I could size it to fit inside of that frame. And since it was a 6x8 frame, but the frame actually takes up a little bit of the space, I knew I needed it to be around 5 inches by 6 inches. And since this is already in a rectangle pattern, I knew it would fit really well inside of that small frame. The other thing I love about Cricut Design Space is that I was working on this on my laptop, which is something that my husband and I share. So it usually stays downstairs in our living room, but I keep my Cricut upstairs in my craft room. So when I'm working on designs in Design Space, I can just save it within the design space, and then once I'm upstairs in my craft room, instead of having to take the laptop with me, I can just get on my cell phone and pull up Design Space, and I can pull up my saved project, and then I can send it to the Cricut from my phone to get cut out. So now that I'm on my cell phone, I just have to go to all categories and then click on my projects, and I can find that word collage that I created when I was in Design Space on my laptop. Now since this is a Maker 3, I can cut on Smart Vinyl, which is a vinyl that you can use in the Maker without a mat. So I clicked without mat, and then I just had to connect my cell phone via Bluetooth to the Cricut, and I picked the Smart Vinyl to be cut out. Once I sent my project to the Cricut Maker 3 to get cut out, the machine will tell you whenever you need to load the mat and whenever you need to start the project. There's little lights on the top of the machine that will flash so that you know what to do next. So with the Cricut Maker 3, what I'm really excited about is this tray that you can add on to the front of it, and it has a little cutting blade on it. So once the Cricut is done cutting out your image, you can just slide the blade over and it cuts the vinyl for you. Now that my image was all cut out, I could move on to weeding the image. And Cricut has a weeding tool, which is what I'm using here. It's just like a little pokey tool, and it really helps lift up the little parts in between the letters or images or whatever it is you chose to cut out. And since I chose this word collage, there's a lot of little fine pieces in there. And I gotta tell you, I love weeding projects. It's like one of my favorite things to do when I'm working with my Cricut. So the fact that there were so many tiny spaces on this was just like making my day. So using that tool, I just removed all of the excess vinyl from the background of the image. Then I took a piece of the Cricut transfer tape and I laid it on top of my word collage, and you can see here it was really curling up, so I just set my scissors on it to hold it down till I got the transfer tape in place. And then I used this little squeegee tool to burnish the image onto the transfer tape so that whenever I pulled up on the tape, it would lift off all of the words. Now I was having a little bit of trouble because there were so many fine letters in here. And I had seen a few other people that were using this new Maker 3 with this smart vinyl, and it's easier if you burnish the letters down on the back side and then lift the back side off first. So that made it a little bit easier. And then I just took my time and I peeled the back off until all the letters were on the transfer tape. I needed something for my word collage to stick to, so I'm using one of these chopping mats from the Dollar Tree, and I just cut it down to a size that would fit on the back side of the smaller inside frame of the 2 frames that I did before. So once the chopping mat has a shiny side and a matte side, and I was afraid that the word collage wasn't going to stick to the matte side, so I made sure that the shiny side was up, and I just had to lay my word collage down over top of it, and then I used that squeegee tool again, and I made sure that it was really adhered down to that piece of chopping mat, and then I could just pull off the transfer tape. So one tip I have for transfer tape is you want to make sure that as you're pulling it off, you're not lifting it up. You're kind of keeping it parallel with whatever you're putting your image on, because then you'll have less of a chance that you're going to actually pull the letters up from whatever you're putting it on. I forgot to hit record, but I just used some hot glue to attach the piece of chopping mat to the back side of the little frame that I created. And then I used a little bit of the clear Scotch tape and I taped it over where the sticks were, just as a little bit of extra security to make sure that that hot glue wasn't going to lift up off of that chopping mat. Since the word collage was kind of a busy pattern, I wanted to keep the decorating on this frame a little bit simple. So I just created a bow using some black and red plaid ribbon that I found at Walmart this year. And I kept the tails pretty long on the bow because I wanted them to look like they were sort of scalloping down the sides of the frame. So once I had the bow glued into the corner, then I kind of bent the ribbon so that it had little like mountains and valleys in it, and then I just hot glued the valleys down into place so that it framed out one side of the picture. I knew I wanted to create something that I could use to display the Christmas cards that I received. So for the second project, I started by taking one of these large flat canvases from the Dollar Tree. I think they measure about 11 by 14. To create a border for my sign, I'm using some painter's tape, and I think this was about 1 inch wide. And I just laid it all around the outside of the canvas, but this was going to act more as a spacer because I wanted the border that I painted to be on the outside of the canvas. So once I had 4 pieces of tape laid down on all 4 sides of the canvas, then I went through and I laid tape down on the inside of the pieces of tape that I already had laid down. That way, when I removed the outside tape, it gave me a nice border that I could paint on. For my border, I decided to use the Crimson color by Waverly, and I did give this 2 coats. I found this white marker at the Dollar Tree, and it says metallic marker, and I'm not sure why they call it a metallic marker because to me it just looks like a chalk pen. But it worked really, really well for this. So I decided to add a little interest to my border, and I just did dashes the whole way around the outside and the inside of my red border. Then I went back into Cricut Design Space, and under images I just searched the word Mary. So if you guys have watched my videos before, you guys know that I struggle with hand lettering. So I always rely on my Cricut for these types of things. And sometimes it's easier to just search for a word that I need rather than try to figure out a font that I would like. So that's why I decided to do a search for the word Mary. And then once I picked out the one that I liked, I added that to my canvas. Now, I knew I wanted my sign to say Merry Mail because I was going to hang Christmas cards on it. So once I had my word sized to how I knew it would fit on my canvas, then I clicked on text, and I already knew that I liked the typewriter font. So I just did a quick search under text, and I found the typewriter font, and I typed out the word mail. And then I could center that under my word Mary so that it would say Merry Mail. And I always like the mix of 2 fonts together. I think that looks really neat. So then once I had my 2 words how I like them, I just clicked around them by clicking off of the 2 words and then creating a rectangle around the 2. And then I went down into the right hand corner and I clicked on weld, and then that way that would keep those 2 together for when I sent it to my Cricut to get cut. Once my Merry Mail was all cut out and I weeded it, and then I added the transfer tape on top, then I could apply it to my canvas. And I did it the same way. I just used my little squeegee tool and rubbed it on, and then like I said, when you're pulling off that transfer tape, just make sure you're keeping it pretty parallel with the project, and it makes it a lot easier so that the letters stick on your project and don't get lifted off with the transfer tape. I had this red and white baker's twine in my stash that I thought would look really cute on this sign, and I knew I needed some strings going across the front so that I could have places to clip my Christmas cards to. So I started by taping it in place first before I hot glued it down, just to make sure that I had the string on how I liked it. and I kind of crisscrossed it around the canvas in several places and just wrapped it around so that there were quite a few strings going around the front. And then once I had the strings how I like them, I just hot glued them into place so that they would be more permanent. Now I was thinking, if I run out of room on this board for my Christmas cards, I think what I'll do is probably hot glue a few strands of wider ribbon onto the bottom of the sign, and then that way they can kind of trail down, and then I could clip more Christmas cards to the ribbon if I need to. I have quite the collection of mini clothespins in my stash because for some reason I just can't resist buying them when I see new ones. But the Dollar Tree does have mini clothespins that are just the natural wood, and then they also have these really pretty wooden stickers for the holidays. So I decided to create just a few little cute clips for my board, and I'm just taking the snowflake wooden cutouts and I'm just hot gluing them to the front of the clothespin so that I could clip them onto the front of my board. Okay, so for the last project, I knew I wanted to use up that piece of canvas that I took off of that 12 by 12 frame. So to start with, I decided to cut it down to about 8.5 by 7.5 into a rectangle shape. Then I took some of those giant craft sticks that I get at Walmart and I cut those down to 8.5 inches too, so that they would fit across that canvas that I cut down, because I wanted to create a little bit of a banner. So I cut 4 sticks down, and then I used the Antique Wax by Waverly and I just gave them a good coat of that and wiped it off so that it would look like a wood stain. I knew I wanted to iron on the image for this project. So under Design Space, when I searched in images, I just searched Merry Christmas and I found one that I liked for this banner. Now, whenever you're using iron-on, you have to make sure that when you send it to the Cricut to be cut, you click the little toggle switch that says mirror, and it even says in parentheses for iron-on. That way it cuts the image out backwards, and then whenever you weed it out and you flip it over to iron it on, then it's in the correct position. I'm using the Cricut Easy Press to iron on my image, and Cricut has a really handy guide to show you what temperature and what time you need to use when you're ironing on different materials. So for mine, it recommended that I let the Easy Press heat up to 340 degrees and I iron it on 30 seconds with light pressure on the front, and then I flip the material over and do an additional 15 seconds on the back. One thing you have to remember when you're using the Easy Press is that you don't want to move it around like you would a regular clothes iron, because you don't want to run the risk that you're going to slide your image or slide the material out from underneath it. You just want to make sure that you're holding it in place. There's also a little timer on the Cricut Easy Press so that you can set it for how many seconds you need, and then you can watch it count down. That way you don't have to worry about setting a timer on your phone or anything like that. It does it for you. Once the plastic is cool to the touch, then you can go ahead and peel it off of the front of your image. I think it's better to peel it off when it is just slightly warm because it keeps the plastic a little bit more flexible. But you definitely don't want it so hot that you can't touch it. When I create banners like this, it's always easier to run the hot glue on the material itself rather than putting hot glue all over the back of the stick. That way you're not getting glue where you don't need it to be. So I started by hot gluing my 2 front sticks on first, and then I flipped it over, and when I got to one of the sticks I realized I cut it too short. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was an easy fix, and at least it was on the back side of the banner. I just had to cut another small piece and attach that to where it was missing. I think if you liked more modern or boho style even, you could probably just add a hanger at this point and call it a day. But I tend to like more farmhouse, so I decided to add a little bit of this black and white gingham ribbon to the front of my sign. And this ribbon is from the Dollar Tree, and it is a little bit thinner, and I was afraid the hot glue would seep through it, so I just decided to use some double-sided tape to stick mine to the front of my banner. For my hanger, I decided to use some jute twine, and I just strung 6 wooden beads onto it, and then I hot glued each end of the jute twine to the back of the sign, and then I just kind of slid 3 beads to each side of the sign. That way it just added a little bit more interest and just a little bit of an extra embellishment. Make sure when you're done watching this video, you check out my description box because I'm going to have links for all of the Cricut products that I used today. And a big thank you again to Cricut for sponsoring this video. And let me know in the comments if you already have a Cricut and what kind of projects you like to make with yours, because I'm always looking for new ideas. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, do all the things. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.